Hi guys, I'm Dr. Sunil Sharma. Today's topic is Meniere's disease. Meniere's disease. This Meniere's disease first described by Prosper Meniere's in 1861. After that, Portman talk about sex surgery, endolymphatic sex surgery. Endolymphatic sex surgery. And the pathogenesis described by Sucknage. So, Prosper Meniere's in 1861 described the disease. Portman talk about sex surgery, endolymphatic sex surgery, and pathogenesis described by Sucknage. So, what is Meniere's disease now? Meniere's disease is classically described by episodic vertigo that should be more than 20 minutes and that should be sudden onset. This is the characteristic of Meniere's disease vertigo. Sudden sensory loss followed by progressive sensory hearing loss. And this hearing loss, initially it is low pitch. After that it being flat, and as disease progress become more on higher frequencies. So this is sensory hearing loss, that is progressive, increase with each episodes. Third one is low pitched tinnitus. These are the characteristic of this vertigo. First symptom is, most common symptom is vertigo. MCQ. This most common symptom is vertigo. Then it is sensory hearing loss, that is progressive increase with each episode of vertigo, and low pitched tinnitus. And in between these you may have oral fullness, sensation of vomiting, and prodromal feeling of attack. So these are the characteristic of Meniere's disease vertigo. Etiopathogenesis. So many theories has given. So many theories has been given about this, but this is still unknown etiology. And it is more common in female than male, 3:2. In India, internationally, it is equal in male and female. In India, it's more common in female. Internationally, almost it is equal in female and males. Age group 30 to 70 years of age. In our series, age group is 30 to 70 years of the age. Initially it is unilateral, can be bilateral, but most of the time 80% cases are unilateral, but after some time there may be chances of 30% cases may convert into bilateral. It's about 20-year gap. Initially this disease present as unilateral, and after 20 years when disease progresses, it becomes bilateral in 30% of the cases. The etiology, we can say it is maybe allergic etiology, it may be autoimmune, it may be viral like herpes simplex, but nothing is definitive. What is the etiology? Nobody knows. It's still unknown etiology. It may be syphilis induced, it may be trauma. In 20% cases it may be genetic. So these are the etiological factors. It may be allergic, it may be autoimmune, it may be viral, mostly herpes simplex type 1 virus, it may be syphilis, it may be trauma, and it may be genetic. In 80% cases, it is sporadic disease. 80% of cases, it is sporadic disease. Now, pathogenesis. The Squeak describe this. This may be because of overproduction of endolymph, and this may be under absorption of endolymph by sac. So these are the theories. Somebody says it's overproduction of endolymph and it's under absorption of endolymph from the sac, so this lead to dilatation of endolymph systems which having more potassium, and this lead to rupture of Reschner's membrane, which ultimately lead to mixing of endolymph with perilymph. So perilymph having more potassium ion ultimately inactivate the nerve fiber, leading to symptom of inactivate nerve fibers, leading to vertigo, hearing loss, and tinnitus. So this is the pathogenesis. But recently, this is not the theory. There is no rupture of endolymphatic. This Reschner's membrane occur in Meniere's disease, because we have seen a lot of temporal cases after post-mortem. So there are so many endolymphatic sac dilatation and hydrops are found post temporal bone dissection. but there are no symptom of and this Meniere disease, and a lot of studies done about this rupture. So we don't know about this definitively. So recently it is considered redistribution. Recently this is redistribution of endolymph inside the endolymphatic system, which leads to this episode of Meniere's disease and episode of vertigo, tinnitus and hearing loss. Now recently, according to latest Scott Brown, this is American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Society, divided into two types. One is definitive Meniere's disease, second one is possible Meniere's disease. Initially it was for certain Meniere disease, definitive Meniere disease, possible Meniere disease, and in between it is probable Meniere disease. But in recent tradition we come to know only two types: definitive Meniere disease and possible Meniere disease. The definitive Meniere disease is if patient having more than 2 episodes, vertigo more than 20 minutes with documented audiometrically, it may be low frequency hearing loss, it may be flat curve, it may be high frequency hearing loss, because most of the patients in India come to us in late stage, that's why we are having high frequency hearing loss. And and classical symptom of SN hearing loss, tinnitus, oral fullness, with excluding possible etiologies. So this is definitive Meniere disease. 2 episode of vertigo more than 20 minutes of time, audiometric documentation of low frequency flat curve or high frequency hearing loss, sensory hearing loss with tinnitus, fullness. These are the other symptoms which should be needed, and exclude other possible etiologies. Possible Meniere disease, here is episode of vertigo more than 20 minutes without PTA documentation, without audiometric documentation, and there may be other symptoms also. So these are the definitive Meniere disease and possible Meniere disease. This is in latest edition. In certain Meniere's disease, we need histopathological examination plus definitive Meniere disease. And probable Meniere disease, more than 2 episodes vertigo, 2 episode vertigo without documentation. So these are the initial presentation, but recently it is definitive Meniere disease or possible Meniere disease. Other classification we can say primary Meniere disease or secondary Meniere disease, or you can say this secondary also known as Meniere's syndrome, and this is called Meniere disease. Primary Meniere disease, it means you don't know any cause. Cause is unknown. So this is idiopathic mania disease. Now secondary mania disease, if you find out the cause like allergy, migraine, trauma, autoimmune, syphilis. Okay. If you find out the cause, that may be allergy, migraine, tinnitus, trauma, or syphilis. Recently we come to know most of the migraine patient having some type of the allergy. So we have to rule out allergic component. And about 30% cases of migraine having vestibular migraine cases will come to having this Meniere's disease. So we have to rule out these symptoms also. According to hearing loss, that is sensory hearing loss and Meniere's disease, we come to know staging of Meniere's disease. Okay. Stage 1, if patient having hearing loss up to 25 dB. Stage 2, if hearing loss 40 dB. Stage 3, if patient having hearing loss of 41 to 70 dB. And stage 4 of Meniere's disease is hearing loss more than 70 dB. So this is the staging according to the American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Society. So we can do staging according to the hearing loss. Stage 1 is if it is less than 25 dB. Stage 2 26 to 40 dB. Stage 3 41 to 70 dB. If it is more than 71 dB, then it is stage 4 Meniere's disease. According to the vertigo and or dizziness with disability, we can again stage the Meniere's disease. Stage 1 is minimal dizziness, no effect on routine work. Stage 1 is minimum dizzy with no effect on routine work. Stage 2, mild dizzy but can work, no disability. Third one is moderate dizzy but affecting routine work. This is moderate dizzy but affecting routine work. Fourth one is severe dizzy with affecting work and routine activity severely. Okay, severe disease with affecting routine work and routine activity severely. Fifth is profound dizzy. Patient continuously dizzy and not working, unable to work. And sixth one is that is disability. patient is bedridden. According to dizziness and working disability, this is again American Otolaryngology Head and Neck Society classification. Dizziness, minimum dizzy, mild dizziness, moderate dizziness, severe dizziness, profound dizziness, and disability, that is patient is bedridden. So this is the classification of Meniere disease according to the vertigo or dizziness. Now diagnosis. Diagnosis, I will say, if it is clinical, most of them clinical diagnosis. Clinical diagnosis characterized by triad, vertigo, hearing loss, tinnitus, oral fullness. This triad should be there. In clinical diagnosis, mostly unilateral initially. Unilateral presentation come to this. So what we are doing, audiometry with CC test. In audiometry and CC test, we will come to know there is low frequency, flat or high frequency hearing loss according to the stage of Meniere disease. But in CC test, we will come to know there is recruitment. In cochlear pathology, in Meniere disease, we will have recruitment phenomena. So this is must. Audiometry is must, and we have to do this audiometry. Only test we can do the audiometry, and if we found any clinical suspicion, we can do imaging. To rule out acoustic neuroma or other CNS tumors, we have to do MRI. This is also must. To exclude other pathologies, that is intracranial pathology, we have to do MRI, and we required some lab test. To rule out syphilis or any other autoimmune disease, we can do Treponema pallidum hemagglutination test, TPHA test. We can do CBC, ESR. We have to do allergic testing. Allergic testing to rule out any allergic component in the Meniere disease. We have to do EANA titer. To rule out any other autoimmune disease. So these are the basic tests. If we are doing that, is more than sufficient. We don't require any ECOG, electrocochleography. We don't require any BEMP test. Okay, that is not practical actually. So we are not doing these tests. Only we require clinical audiometry and imaging and some lab test. That is more than sufficient to diagnose the Meniere disease. This is the practical approach. If we are doing so many fancy things like electrocochleography and BEMP test, I don't recommend this, and nobody doing this. Only we are teaching according to the books. Then nobody is doing this ECOG and BEMP test and electrocochleography, video nystagmography. That is not required. 100% not required. Okay. So we are not doing. We are doing only audiometry, imaging, and these blood tests, and the clinical ground we will come to know this patient having Meniere disease. Now, what is the treatment? Treatment in acute attack. We are not treating the disease, we are just managing the Meniere disease, and most of the treatment only targeting the vertigo, not targeting tinnitus and hearing loss. So we are managing this menial disease. Acute attack, the therapy of choice is Burden, or you can say beta-statin. 16 milligram TDS, or you will give 40 milligram BD dose. Okay, so beta-statin is the therapy of choice. First drug we have to give an acute attack. We can give other drug, diazepam, antiemetics, any drug we can give. And this is the word: beta-statin, diazepam, and antiemetic drug. If patient come to you with vomiting sensation and other symptoms, so this is the acute attack therapy. Now chronic management. You have to avoid. You have to give suggestion of avoidance of caffeine, tobacco, salt. You have to restrict the salt intake, caffeine intake, and tobacco and smoking also. These smoking, tobacco are main contributing factor of menial disease. If you are decreasing intake, definitely attack of vertigo is decreasing. And stress management. We have to counsel the patient about menial disease, how to manage, and what is the effect of stress on menial disease. Now medical management. Medical management, you can have so many things, but recently what we are talking about is you have to give medicine like beta-statin. You have to give anticholinergic like prochlorperazine, meclizine. You can give diuretic like acetazolamide. And you give any antiemetic drug. So this is the chronic management. Medical management, you can give any beta-statin, anticholinergic, diazepam, acetazolamide, antiemetic drugs. Okay, these are quite effective in management of the. If patient not managed by this, now you will come to know surgical management. What we are doing is intratympanic gentamicin or steroid, mainly dexamethasone. So this we are giving intratympanic gentamicin and this dexamethasone steroid. Efficacy of is about 92% and efficacy of about 62%. We can give a repeated dose of gentamicin transtympanic gentamicin, and we can give steroids. If hearing loss more than 50 dB on presentation, you have to go gentamicin therapy. You can give 20 milligram in 5 ml. 0.5 ml. We have to take 1 ml and we have to inflate about 0.6 ml by, you can give by spinal needle or 1.5 26 number needle. We can use any needle, and we have to go under microscopic vision. This 20 milligram and 0.5 ml in intratympanic space and middle ear space. And if less than 50 dB, this is the protocol in our hospital at Rajasthan Hospital Sahibag, or I am practicing at Authentic ENT Center. You can give dexamethasone repeated doses, mostly 2 to 3 doses required. Mostly 2 to 3 doses required. You can repeat on 0, first day, 1 month and 3rd month. This is the R protocol. We are following it here. You can give on day 1st. You can repeat 1 month and 3rd month. Suppose some patient coming from remote area. What I am doing, this is the tympanic membrane. You just put gromate and keep F-gel, infiltrate gentamicin or steroid in gromate, remote area, single setting. You don't have to repeat the dose. You put gromate and give gentamicin drop or Oflox or Ciplox D drop, still at night. If more than 50 dB hearing loss, if less than 50 dB hearing. If some patient coming from remote area, you are not supposed to, that patient will come after 1 month or 3rd month. You just put on first visit gromate inside and infiltrate gentamicin if it is more than 50 dB loss, and infiltrate dexamethasone if it is less than 50 dB hearing loss, and still Oflox or Ciplox D hearing drops each night, or gentamicin drops on alternate day or once in a weekly in that particular year if it is more than 50 dB hearing loss at night. So this presentation, you don't have to repeat this multiple therapy or repeated doses. The result of these, gentamicin about 92% and dexamethasone is about 62%. This is the best therapy we are following, and this result are better than endolymphatic sac decompressor. Recently in Scott Brown, there is no benefit of Manet's device, that is low pressure device, no benefit of endolymphatic sac decompression, and no benefit for tenotomy. Tenotomy means you are sectioning the stapedius tendons or tensor tympani muscle tendon. So these are not recommended. So recently in Meniere disease, a lot of patients, even I have done more than 2 or 3 cases of endolymphatic sac decompression in Meniere disease, but this is not effective right now. The endolymphatic sac decompression is absolute in surgical setting. Meniere's device is not recommended in Meniere disease, that is not effective, and tenotomy is not effective, because if you are doing endolymphatic sac decompression, it is equal to putting the gromate or mastodectomy. Okay, so a lot of clinical trials done about this endolymphatic sac decompression. Either you do mastodectomy or gromate, that is equal to the endolymphatic sac decompression. What we are following, suppose this patient is not treated by this having intractable vertigo, even though we have given this gentamicin. This is first line therapy in our center. Only surgery you can do if it is hearing loss is more than 90 dB, you can do labyrinthectomy. This is the control rate about 90%. If it is patient hearing lost, you do labyrinthectomy. If hearing is preserved, you can do vestibular neurectomy. These are simple surgeries by doing retrosigmoid approach transcranially. you go retrosigmoid by having 2 or 3 centimeter window, and you just cut the vestibular nerve. That is very simple approach. So you can have this. Most of the patients don't require this after doing this. Okay, so this is all about management of Meniere disease. What is not recommended in Meniere disease recently? There is no use of Meniere's device, no use of endolymphatic sac decompression, and no use of tenotomy. You can have look in recent edition of Scott Brown. That is 100% sure. Nobody is supposed to do endolymphatic sac decompression. Somebody doing that is only fancy things. So in this, if 30% cases, 30% cases progress to bilateral disease, and we have to look audiometric testing on first day and yearly. Every yearly we have to do this close follow-up of Meniere disease patient, and some patient developing bilateral disease. Then in bilateral cases of Meniere disease, you should not use intratympanic gentamicin. You should not use intratympanic gentamicin, and you can give only intratympanic dexamethasone. That is very safe in bilateral disease, because if bilateral vestibular hypofunction occurs, patient will unable to stand. That's why we are not using gentamicin in bilateral cases. In bilateral cases, we can give gentamicin, this intratympanic steroid therapy. Okay. In bilateral cases, you should not do vestibular neurectomy. In bilateral cases, you can do laryngectomy if it is hearing loss is more than 90 dB. So this is all about Meniere disease. Some special terms are Lermois syndrome. Lermois syndrome, if it is hearing loss followed by vertigo. In this Lermois syndrome, initially patient will come to you with presentation of sensory hearing loss. After having loss, that patient will feel that he will and she will come into vertigo. So hearing loss, sensory hearing loss followed by vertigo. In other normal Meniere disease, we will come to know that vertigo leading to hearing loss. In this, the hearing loss leading to vertigo or tinnitus. And other term is Tumarkin crisis. In Tumarkin crisis, if patient feeling drop or attack without loss of consciousness, this is Tumarkin crisis and Lermois disease. This is special terms, and so this is all about Meniere's disease, and thank you so much.